The biggest Rise of the Flatborn tournament has just ended last weekend in France with almost 200 players, and we have the top 8 deck list for everyone here in this video. Hi everyone, this is D-Summon from Mushroom Report, and the Lorcana tournament scene is getting stronger and stronger. Just last weekend in France, the biggest tournament ever post Rise of the Flatborn with 198 players just ended last weekend, and we got all the top deck lists here. You haven't seen the Mushroom Report website yet, then well, you're missing out on a lot of top deck lists because I actually cover some of the bigger events over there. As long as over like 30 players and up, we can get all the deck lists. I always put them up here on the website for everyone to enjoy. So yeah, definitely go and check it out. So for this Lunar Trotter Cup, this one was held last weekend with 15 euros of entry, and for everyone who entered, you actually get 2 booster packs. So you pretty much got your entry fee covered already. So why wouldn't anyone join? That's why there's over 198 players who actually gathered in this event hall here to take part in the event. So without further ado, I'm going to be starting off with the top 8 decks. Let's start off with this aggro deck for Amethyst Ruby. So this is Amethyst Ruby, but maybe not one you're as familiar with because this is a super aggro version. There's no real high cost in this deck. The highest cost characters in this deck is up to 4 costs only with your Merlin Rabbit and Merlin Goat. So Madam Mim is here, of course, with the full bounce engine. You should be very familiar with this one by now. Using Madam Mim, you're going to keep bouncing your goats and bouncing back your rabbits to just make use of all that synergy to gain a lot of lore and draw a lot of cards. And of course, you're going to be using Arthur as well for all that strategy. So this is the main idea. And of course, Thief and Ambitions is a nice card that's being added to pretty much every single Ruby deck because it's really easy to get it off as it's a song card, and you can also ink it if you need to. And of course, in this deck, with everything just keep on going back to hand, you can afford to use Thief and Ambition because the characters just go back to hand after you used it anyway. So why not just use it to just hit some of your opponent's lowest character? Meanwhile, you're going to be rushing them a lot and gaining a lot of lore really quickly. So yep, that's the idea for this very first deck. Moving on, we've got a Ruby Sapphire deck. So this is something that a lot of people are talking about, of course, with the Popsicle Nightvow combo. This one is actually slightly different, I feel, because this one goes a lot more aggressive with a lot of low-cost characters. A lot of the Ruby Sapphire decks that y'all might be familiar with starts off very slow. They start off first turn playing Popsicle, turn 2 they're playing Grammatella. The idea is that they just want to keep on ramping up with your Mickey Mouse Detective and all that kind of stuff so that yeah, you can just go into the late game and you really control them with all the advantage you can get through your Nightvow and your Hiram Flavorversion to actually just draw a lot of cards, and that's the idea. But this one is very different because you have a lot of low cost drops. You have your Sergeant Tips and Flounder being there, your Aurora Regal Princess, your Cruella is probably there to handle any Minnie Mouse stylish surfer probably, and you even have Jasmine. You have all these characters that are just there with no real abilities other than just to gain you a lot of lore. All these vanillas, even Maleficent Uninvited is also back here as well. That being said, this one can still go in the late game. You still have some of your characters like your Lady Tremaine, you have your Gaston, your Scar, your Maleficent. So the deck does aim to go into late game, but only when necessary, I guess. Because Sapphire Ruby, if you're playing the full control version, you tend to actually lose out a lot of tempo in the very early game because all you have is like Grammatellas and the Minnie Mouse Detective. You are not really gaining lore and pushing on your opponent to make them stress out over what they need to play. They can actually try to rush you very fast with a hyper aggro deck. But yeah, this one is a very opposite take on it. The idea is that you just want to have an early game there and actually show some board presence and actually threaten your opponents because your opponents are playing Amethyst Ruby and there's going to be a lot of mana mims and also your Merlin Goats being there in the early game. So you need to actually have some characters with bigger willpower and strength there to take out your opponent characters, while at the same time you can actually gain some lore and gain some pressure on your opponent and not just let them freely gain any amount of lore and card draw whatever they want in the early game. So at least that's the idea I think that this deck has. Maybe they test it out online and they prefer this build and they made top 8 in a 200 player tournament. So kudos to them. And then here we have another Amethyst Ruby in the top 8, but this build is again slightly different because this one actually plays a card like Peter Pan Shadow. So the idea of this card is that all your characters with Rush will also gain Evasive, though the characters with Rush in this deck currently are just your Queen of Hearts and your Madam Mim Fox and your Maui. So I don't think it's really there to give them Evasive. It might help out to actually take out some of the more problematic characters, for example, Minnie Mouse Stylish Surfer. But aside from that, I think the main idea is just for Peter Pan Shadow himself, because he's actually basically the exact same stats as Pongo, just that he's uninkable, but in return, he also has Rush as well. So maybe there is some form of value that this player is getting from that Rush. So yeah, at least that's a slightly different take. And also Elsa is a card that I haven't seen too much since Rise of the Floodborn. A lot of people have been choosing to just play more of your Yasma and Lady Tremaine. They just want to take out the characters without worrying about just exerting them. The thing is, with Peter Pan Shadow and Elsa, there's actually quite a ton of uninkables in this deck. Over 21 in fact, so that's actually quite dangerous. But then again, right now the Amethyst Ruby actually has an early game with your Madam Mims and your Merlins being able to actually help you generate advantage, hopefully let you draw some cards via Rabbit. Then yeah, maybe it actually feels safer for this deck to go a little bit higher on the uninkable count to 21. So yeah, that's the idea. And actually, I also kind of like the Queen of Hearts inside a Ruby deck, simply because it lets you basically play a fire the cannons in a way on your opponent's characters, just that they have to be exerted first, but she basically does the same job and she can be inkable. So yeah, there's no real reason not to actually try out Queen of Hearts over here. And then for the last top 8 deck list, we have another Amethyst Ruby. But this one has some interesting text of their own as well. Mainly is that Pinocchio over there. So Pinocchio has the nice ability to exert one of your opponent's chosen characters when it's played out. So it combos very well, of course, with Madam Mim Fox, because you get to exert their characters and then after that, just return it back to hand for your Madam Mim Fox to just rush in and take them out. And since Madam Mim Fox actually has 4 strength, that's actually something that works out very well to take out any of the bigger threats, because even if it's playing, say, your Yasma and your Lady Tremaine, they all only have 4 willpower, so this is actually a good way to just rush in and just use one card to take out your opponent's threats. So that's an idea for thought. And another one to see over here is, of course, Aladdin, something that I haven't seen in a while since Rise of Floodborn came out, because everyone has been aiming to actually play your Lady Tremaine and your Yasma to just banish those opponent's characters. So since you're doing that, you won't really have characters on the board to challenge, right? I guess that's the idea, but actually I still like the Aladdin package, simply because I feel that it actually controls the opponent quite well. Playing Amethyst Emerald in the past, I actually have to worry about Aladdin a lot, because I have to worry about getting my law counts being brought down while the opponent's one gets brought up. So I like the Aladdin one simply because they can actually have some law control over the current build, which doesn't really actually handle your opponent's law. With that said, of course, there's people who are playing Lady Tremaine over Baron Matriarch. You can see some of those players in the PAX Unplugged deck list, which is also up on the site. So yeah, I think that's a different take on it, and I actually like the idea as well. And that's the top 8 deck list. Let's move on to the top 4. We actually have double Ember Steel. So these two Ember Steel actually has different builds though. This one feels to me a bit more adjusted for Rise of the Floodborn, with the full package with your Cinderella, your The Queen, you have Benja, and all that kind of good stuff. Of course, Beast Tragic Hero is picking up on a lot of popularity. His prices is shooting way up high for a very good price for your legendary card. And yeah, it's a very good card. It's inkable, he has pretty decent stats, and you can just play him and he just stands there and he just gains you a card draw every single turn. Until he gets damaged, then you can just use him to punch into one of your opponent's characters with 7 strength. Personally, I really like Beast a lot, and I feel that you can even consider just cutting out Stitch Carefree Surfer totally, because he's just drawing you 2 cards in turn 7 and you need to have other characters on the board, while you actually don't even need to do all that kind of stuff with just Beast Tragic Hero on his own. By turn 7, you've already drawn your 2 cards just by Beast standing there and not doing anything, and that's really enough value for me. Not to mention that you don't really need to have that high of a count in your Inkwell anymore, since Cinderella can technically even be shifted in with 5 costs. So yeah, you don't even really need to go that high in law count anymore. One of the most interesting choices here, of course, is Lawrence, because when he's not damaged, he has 4 strength, which is really good, of course, even against, say, your Amethyst Ruby, because what do they have? A lot of characters with 4 willpower, with the Lady Tremaine and Yasma. Even if you're playing against the Sapphire Ruby build, there's also Gaston there, which can also be taken out just by a Lawrence alone. It seems that for Rise of Floodborn, that 4 willpower, 4 strength is kind of a threshold there to determine like whether this character can be taken out that easily. So that's one interesting tech that I think should definitely be considered. And then this other top 4 Ember Steel feels that bit more first chapter-ish, because it's still playing cards like Tiny Tactician and Beast Hard-Headed, which you don't see as often right now in Rise of Floodborn, especially when there's Benja, which is a cheaper option compared to Beast. My thoughts is that this is a bit of a preference, of course. You still like the surprise factor of being able to bring in your Tinkerbell, Giant Fairy, so you still want the shift factor. That's why Tiny Tactician is still there. And of course, with that many 3-in cards available, you don't really want to play that much Benja anymore, so you want to go into Beast Hard-Headed. Another interesting card to note, something that's similar between this and the previous deck list, is that both of these decks are playing Smash over Strength of a Raging Fire. And why is that? The idea is that you have Ariel Spectacular Singer, so you want more song cards, and they kind of do the same job, don't they? So why don't you just play Strength of a Raging Fire? Well, this could be a consideration for meta between US and France differences, but I think that this is also possibly a consideration of the issue with Amethyst Ruby having now a much stronger early game where they are playing all their Mana Mims and also Merlin. So you actually want some of the bigger, stronger characters to be able to take them out while not having to swarm the field with a lot of weenie characters that all get taken out really easily. And of course, you don't want to worry about Be Prepared as well. So with all that considered, with a lot of people playing Be Prepared or the Ruby decks, then yeah, let's not go white. Let's just go have your stronger, secure characters with higher strength, higher willpower, and that's also why maybe the Beast Hard-Headed was chosen. And since you don't have that many characters, you want more secure damage that's guaranteed, so you play Smash. At least that's the consideration I have. I think many people might disagree with the idea of playing Smash over Strength of a Raging Fire. After all, even when I dig into my own back end, I see that I've submitted 10 steel deck lists so far after Rise of Floodborn came out, and 9 of them played Strength of a Raging Fire. Hi folks, Editor Mushu here. I realized the narrator Mushu might be not very clear in his statements, because he showed the records where there's been 10 Ember Steel top decks since Rise of Floodborn came out. We're going through 2 deck lists that are using Smash over Strength of a Raging Fire, and yet there's 9 decks that's playing Strength of a Raging Fire. While I show you the numbers are actually accurate, that's because there was a single Amethyst Steel deck that also played Strength of a Raging Fire as well, and that's how the numbers tally up. I apologize, the statements were not very clear, hope you understand now, and let's go right back into the video. In the end, these are the 2 top decks that make this almost 200 player event, so you gotta give credit to them and maybe just go and try it out. It might work out very well for you. So that's the 3rd and 4th place, and the top 2 decks are of course Amethyst Ruby. But that's not to say that you should just treat them as similar top decks, because there's actually some different tech choices that I think are pretty interesting. Well, for starters, many people are not really playing Dragonfire anymore because they are playing Yasma and Lady Tremaine. Especially Lady Tremaine, since you don't have to let your opponent draw a card when you banish their characters. But is that really enough? What if you need a bit more targeted banishing when you just have your Lady Tremaine and you can't get rid of something over there because they have multiple characters on the board? Do you always have Yasma, but you don't want to let your opponent draw cards as well? Then what do you turn to? You turn to the most diabolical scheme. The idea is there's actually a lot of villains in this deck, with your Madam Mims, your Queen of Hearts, your Yasma, your Tremaine, and Maleficent, so it's really quite easy for the deck to trigger off the most diabolical scheme. Just use your early game Mims to keep your opponent's board in control. Tremaine should be able to clear your opponent's boss characters. Scar Vicious Cheater is also there to punish anyone trying to go wipe their place, and you still need targeted removal. There's now the most diabolical scheme, and of course in the end there is gonna be prepared. So there is just all these methods to just clear opponent's board, while in the meantime you have your spell book just there slowly exerting every single turn, trying to gain you lore while you just take control and try to win the game in that kind of manner. So it's a really slow deck, not exactly my favorite, but yeah. And then finally we have the champion deck. The champion is the Amethyst Ruby, but this one actually has slightly different choices. So for starters, instead of Queen of Hearts, this deck is actually playing Lady Tremaine over Baron Matriarch. Like I mentioned earlier on, the idea is that you can actually reduce your opponent's loss, so it's actually a pretty nice card to kind of control your opponent. But I think that one consideration also is that you're able to shift into her in turn 4 and to, of course, Lady Tremaine, Imperious Queen. So I think that that option of being able to suddenly shift into a character is a bit of a surprise element for Lorcana, which is really useful. So you actually want to keep your opponent on your toes. They're going to be worried that what are they going to be playing on the board on their turn 3, especially when you go into your turn 4 next. So that's one idea that you would actually want to make your opponent just worry a bit more with this possibility. I think it works out. I personally like it. Another option over here is that instead of playing the Scarvicious Cheater, this player is playing your Minnie Mouse Stylish Surfer, which all along I thought that this was a fantastic card. As a 3 cost, so you can use her to actually sing even Thief and Ambitions if you need to. After all, she has evasive, so what's 2 willpower when she just has 1 left? Because she's just evasive, she can just keep on questing. Or of course, you can just use Minnie Mouse to sing for your friends on the other side. Well, the best card still. And then if you need to, as long as you have another villain on the board, you can use Minnie Mouse to sing for the most diabolical scheme. So there's a lot of ways that you can use Minnie Mouse over the Scarvicious Cheater. Personally, I actually prefer this version. I think that there's a lot more possibilities that you can actually play out compared to using, say, Queen of Hearts and Scarvicious Cheater. That's a little bit more direct because you don't really have anything for Queen to shift into, so there's no surprise factor over there. The main surprise factor is a turn 7 Scarvicious Cheater, so that's a different kind of option there. But maybe you disagree. After all, everyone has different card choices. They like different ways of how decks are played and how certain cards actually work out in your deck. So yeah, everyone has different options. I mean, this is the whole idea, to actually have the discussion on this, for the top 2 decks, show you the differences and let you decide which one you actually prefer. But aside from these 2 different card choices, the bulk of the deck, the remainder of it is pretty much the same, where only the quantity of certain cards are different, but that's pretty much about it. Even all the song cards and the item cards are exactly the same, which kind of makes me wonder if both of them know each other when they build the deck. And there you have it. That's the top 8 deck list for the biggest Lorcana tournament so far, with almost 200 players held in France. Do you like the deck list, especially when so many of them are Amethyst Ruby? Do you like the differences in the tech choices? Let me know in the comments below. Maybe you let me know which of the decks are you playing right now. And I hope you all enjoyed this video. This is our first commentary on the big tournament meta. I just thought that this one was so big that I just want to share with everyone. And I hope you all enjoyed this video. This is D Summon from Mushu Report, signing out.